CTP Mondays. The show features Tyler Fornes and Bashaud Vaughn as they talk your Minnesota Vikings with you, the fans.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very black and blue edition of Climbing the Pocket Mondays. I'm your co-host, Tyler Fornes. We have the trusty producer, Dave, here in the bottom right corner of your screen. Just above him is my co-host, Deshaun. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Been better.
I'm good, man. I'm like freezing tonight. You guys gonna have to bear with me. The video is moving slow.
Hey, no worries. We're just gonna blame Klint Kubiak's play calling for that one. So I want to answer a question in the chat real quick here. Conal Gallagher is like, is Zimmer still a coach? Yes, he is, and I think we need to set some realistic expectations for that. The Wilf family has only fired one head coach during the season, and that was Brad Childress. And by firing Brad Childress in the middle of the year, that was specifically because of insubordination, not performance on the field. So we should expect Mike Zimmer to be the head coach throughout the rest of the season. After the season is a whole different ballgame. We can have the discussion like, hey, should he be fired? Should he stay? You know, that's a fair discussion. But right now he's going to be the head coach of the Vikings. I just think we need to understand that it's not necessarily a permanent thing. It's just get through the season kind of thing.
What percentage do you put on that he'll be coach through the end of the season?
90%. I really think he'll be the coach through the rest of the year unless he does something to warrant being fired outside of performance, something that you don't expect, like how Brad Childress cut Randy Moss 11 years ago today. That's the kind of decision that will get Mike Zimmer terminated with cause to save the Wilfs about $20 million over the next two seasons. Now, when you kind of look at everything encompassed, I think it's about a 99% chance he is not the head coach after this season unless he pulls a rabbit out of his ass and wins the Super Bowl.
That's funny.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't know. We'll see if they try to cater to some of their offensive players. You can start to see the frustrating is mounting with guys like Adam Thielen.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell Kirk Cousins is frustrated. He doesn't even want to answer questions anymore. He's deferring all the questions to Zimmer. So we'll see if they just think to their players, see if they get rid of Zim. midseason to, I don't know, just get something to happen. And yes, Stephen Weatherly, man, salt in the wound. Denver got a sack. We lose Danielle Hunter. They want him. I think everybody on the defensive line registered one pressure except for Everson Griffin. So, yeah, that D-line depth ain't doing so well, and now it's even worse with D-Torn Peck. This season, man, it's hitting rock bottom fast. Like, we were just hovering above it for a long time. Probably like since the Bengals lost, we were like hovering above rock bottom and just like barely surviving. But that Cowboys loss, man, that's bad. That's rough.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be rough to overcome.
All right. Well, hey, speaking of bad, we got ourselves a nice little Southern Tier Blueberry Whirl Milkshake IPA with a Vikings koozie. So at least I get to indulge the pain with the thing that's causing the most of it. So let's before we kind of talk about the future of this team, which we're going to do quite a bit of here tonight, guys, let's kind of talk about the game itself. And what was really interesting about the game is that we're really starting to see trends with this team, which you do see as we kind of start the second half of the season. And through the first half, like Bill Parcells always talked about, after 6 games, back when you have 4 preseason games, your season was half done. You know what your team is by this point. And because there were only 3 preseason games, we are at the halfway point because we have played 7 regular season games as well. Obviously, you don't count the record in those preseason games, which we didn't win any of them, but we're 3-4. We know what this team is. They are fantastic coming out of the blocks. When you have everything structured and scripted and game planned and ready to go, this team is great. That they have shown it time and time again. The first drive against the Cowboys, fantastic. Like, Kirk Cousins was calculated. He was calm, cool. He was confident in what he was seeing and what he was doing. And they scored a touchdown real quick. Throughout the rest of the game, they scored 6 points. And I think that's the evolution of this football team. The structure is gone. This team doesn't know what to do. Whether it's a quarterback issue, whether it's a play calling issue, whether it's a Mike Zimmer directive issue, they don't know how to continue it. And it's very frustrating to see because this is a top 5 offense on paper, top 5 offense when you consider the skill involved, the cohesion with the scheme. And they're playing like a D2 football team going into Alabama half the time. Very frustrating to watch.
There is. Come on, Deshaun.
It's hard to point blame because there's blame everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's hard to point blame, but there's blame to go around everywhere. Like, I know, like, Klint has not been good, man. He's just after the scripted plays, he's not been good. But execution is also not there for him to be good. The offensive line almost gave up like 10 pressures together last night, so they kind of reverted back to the offensive line of old. And then, and JJ, because JJ is such a good player, he's going to make mistakes at times. Everybody does, but that route he ran where he slowed up on his route just a tad bit and he wasn't able to complete the pass, that's a big play. If you get that catch, that was like a 30, 35-yard play down the field. And I don't believe that drive ended in points. I can't remember, but I do not believe that drive ended in points. It might have ended in 3, maybe. I don't remember. But
no,
if he catches that completely changes the outlook. Like, that gives you another successful drive. Right. You get confidence. You do, like, when we threw that pass to Tyler Conklin and he caught it, it gives you that confidence boost that the offense needs. And we haven't been able to hit on those plays of execution, not necessarily because of play calling. Now, don't get me wrong. Kirk Cousins, his execution is awful the whole night. So bad. And it's just one is not helping the other. They're both coming up short. And it makes you wonder, like, does a new offensive minded coach really fix it that fast? Is it like, are we really just one better consistent play caller away, or do we still need a few pieces? And that's kind of when you get to how far away or how long this rebuild is going to be. you got to start looking at those kind of things because, you got guys like Thielen I think Thielen's 30, 31 now. JJ, I think he still has a few years left, but you have to keep him happy at least. I mean, rookies are still allowed to not be happy and request trades. So it's weird now because you're acting and you're looking to keep those guys happy so you don't get another like Stephon Diggs situation. So it's an odd situation for sure. You're like, it's like a purgatory. You're like stuck. That's what it feels like. This offense is. It feels like they're stuck and won't be able to like advance like anytime soon.
No, 100%. And I think when you kind of assign blame, there's a lot to go around.
But
and I think
I will say,
yeah.
I think Deshaun's delayed hearing this.
Oh, no video lag, man. This is yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right,
I'm just a little delayed. But you're good. Go ahead, Tyler.
All right. Well, I was talking about the blame, and there's a lot to go around, but I think that you can put 100% on it with how this team has been constructed and their philosophies and the combination of it just doesn't make sense. Like, the scheme is fine. Focusing on the defense, okay, I get it. When you kind of take a look at the salary cap, it's pretty even offense and defense, but you're asking way more from the defense than the offense when it really should be flip-flopped. You have a season that was deemed win now for the head coach and the GM, and you're trusting it with a rookie play caller who's never called plays at any level of football. They're trying to win a Super Bowl, but they're being disingenuous on how they're building the team, how they're approaching free agency, how they're approaching the future with the draft, how they're trying to call plays and strategize to win football games. They're contradicting each other throughout the entire process. And then you have Klint Kubiak and Kirk Cousins, where Kubiak is calling some really nice plays. And Deshaun, you kind of mentioned in the chat yesterday, like there were a couple times, one, they need to stop running that split zone action where you have the tight end or the fullback going across the formation and bootlegging it because they were eating it up. It reminded me a lot of the Packers at the end of 2019 when we were playing for the division. Like, they knew it was coming, they read it, they stopped it. And we didn't really adjust to that. And that was very frustrating. And there was a couple instances where Kirk Cousins went blatant check down. It was Madison one time, CJ Ham. And on the intermediate level, an easy throw, an open throw, Kirk Cousins refused to make it. And I think no matter how good of an offense Klint Kubiak is calling or how bad of an offense he's calling, if Kirk is unwilling to push the ball down the field with open throws, with easy throws, not just, hey, I'm going to chuck it up to Justin Jefferson because he's a top 10, top 15 receiver and I can trust him. If he's not willing to make those easy throws down the field, you can't be successful. And the EPA really stood out. He had a negative EPA for the game, 27th out of 29 quarterbacks that qualified this past week. And that includes a couple quarterbacks that ended up playing multiple snaps for a couple teams, including the Saints, who had Simeon and Winston both qualify with the metric. And then his third quarter EPA was like negative 0.5 points, which if you're not familiar with EPA, is staggering. Like, that's like Justin Fields 1 passing yard bad. Like, thank you. Like, this is something that you can find on my Twitter timeline. Dave, I appreciate you grabbing it. Like, if you take a look, just this week, quarterback efficiency, Kirk Cousins, yeah, on the X and Y axis, you want to be above the X axis to the right of the Y axis. Look at how good Geno Smith is on the far right. Geno Smith had the game of his life this past weekend against Jacksonville. He was on fire. It's weird, but he did. He had a +1 EPA in the first quarter. A +1 EPA. That's phenomenal. That's like Patrick Mahomes like throwing 6 touchdowns in a game kind of stuff. But that's also unsustainable. And throughout the entire game, he posted like a 0.35 GPA, which is very, very good. Kirk Cousins, first quarter, it was like a 0.5 GPA, which we've seen consistently throughout the year. The next 3 quarters were all negative,
first
including that
drive.
Yep, the scripted drive where they are very confident. This is something that Kirk Cousins has a lot of influence on throughout the week because he is QB1. He's running the plays. Hey, Kirk, what are you comfortable with? Boom, 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 and boom. And it's very frustrating to see that there's no development. There's no consistency. There's so much contradiction. And now we're in this mess that we're in, that we have a quarterback who's got a $45 million cap hit, who doesn't trust himself to throw the ball down the field when he's very, very, very good at throwing the ball down the field. And an offensive coordinator that can't get on the same page with the head coach and the quarterback, a head coach that wants to run an offense that would be perfect for 1995, and the defense is not nearly performing what they should be. This is an institutional failure from the top down. And the victory over the Saints in 2019 has really been a setback for this team, and it's bearing the fruit now. And Drew, I like that. If we come members of the Church of Jesus, Mike, and Latter-day Rubes, will that help? Look, no, it won't. You're just going to become a delusional cult saying that this team is going to win a Super Bowl this year. This is a Super Bowl roster. This is a great football team. No, we got to be honest with ourselves. We're Vikings fans. If we get ourselves all delusional, guess what? We're going to see the ghost of Waswa Sirwanga this upcoming weekend against the Ravens and lose by 50. Like, we got to be honest with ourselves. That is why you're here. You appreciate the honesty. You appreciate the genuine, the caring about this football team. We're not rubes. We're analysts and fans. We care, but we're honest with ourselves.
I want you to tell me about this. I was screaming during the game about this. As you can see, it's the passing chart. And yep. I was yelling at people, you can ask Mary, that he's thrown like 4 or 5 passes in a row behind the line of scrimmage. Well, it turns out it was 11. 11 of the 35. Another 11 of the 35 didn't make it to the 5-yard line beyond the line of scrimmage. Is that asking too much? He's only throwing to the 5. We're not even talking to the sticks. So 22 out of that 35 is either behind the line of scrimmage or just a short check down Charlie in front. Why?
Look, if you watched Purple Daily last night, I joined the Score North guys, and I said it plain as day. Kirk Cousins is a very talented quarterback. He played like a chicken shit. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He played like a coward, and he wasn't willing to push the ball down the field. Like, you have 2 top 15 receivers. You have a guy who's an emerging potential star at tight end. You have KJ Osborne, who is also breaking out in his own right. And you're not willing to push the ball down the field at all. Now, look, you can't expect him to push the ball completely down the field because the offensive line was spotty. And you have to be fair. You can't expect him to push the ball down the field all the time. But when there are multiple throws that are open in intermediate levels of the field, like 8 to 10 yards, like, we're not asking you to be a god. We're asking you not to have a 4.4 average depth of target. Get that like at 7.5. We're not asking for the world. We're asking you to play within yourself what you have shown us that you can do on a regular basis. And he refused to do it. And to me, the way he played was he played scared. He played like he didn't want to lose to Cooper Rush. He didn't go in there with a mentality like, I want to crush Cooper Rush and show him, welcome to the NFL. This is how a starting quarterback plays. No. He shriveled up into the fetal position and did the absolute bare minimum, hoping to skate by with a win. And that's been the theme of the last 4 games.
Well, Yinka was there last night, and he reported, as well as it's been repeated today across the Vikings sphere, that during some of those checkdowns, you could see Thielen or Jefferson wide open, cruising across the middle, more than 10 yards downfield, and then you just watched Kirk bounce around like, even when he wasn't under pressure, but felt like he was, feeling ghosts, and check it down to C.J. Ham. And C.J. Ham had more targets than Justin Jefferson. That should be a crime.
Mm-hmm. And it's you don't have to force feed Justin Jefferson. We're not asking you to do the Randy ratio. 40% of all targets need to go to Justin Jefferson. But 4 targets in a close game where he played 48 snaps, you have to do better than that. There's no excuse for it. Like Cooper Rush, undrafted free agent for the Dallas Cowboys, targeted Amari Cooper 13 times, CeeDee Lamb 8 times. That's over 50% of his 36 pass attempts. You know why? Because you target your best players and you give them the football. It's that simple. I don't understand what Kirk's deal is, but there's some kind of disconnect with him and his receivers. Like, where's the gunslinger Kirk? Where is the guy who can make these pinpoint throws? Like, just think of that Green Bay game, the tie. How many great throws he made at the end of that game to get us in position to win, to tie the game, to send into overtime. That touchdown to Thielen, that's all-timer stuff. He has the capabilities, and he's shown it time and time again, but he won't do it. And that's the biggest frustration. Why can't he be consistent with it? Why can't he do it just a little more? Give us 25% more. Just adding that would make a big difference for perception of Kirk playing like he's scared or a coward and just checking down all the time to, hey, Kirk's willing to push the ball a little bit down the field. 4 more passes down the field. We're not asking for a lot, but that perception would flip on its axis completely. And, man, it's just frustrating.
Well, we know Kirk goes through, he'll run through hot streaks and then he'll get cold streaks. And obviously this was one of those down games. Hopefully it doesn't continue. But however, that's going to be interesting to see when we go against Baltimore this weekend. It's just, it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's all about confidence with Kirk Cousins. And you could see early. You can see early that his confidence wasn't there. I mean, he had the one throw there on the first drive. He made a couple of good throws, and they were able to get down the field and score points. But after that, his confidence just went out the window, and the offensive line didn't have a great game. And that's, unfortunately, you're not going to have a good game from Kirk Cousins if your offensive line is not playing well or where it should be. At least like okay, but they were bad. You were getting interior pressure. You get interior pressure on Kirk Cousins, he's going to shut down every single time, and that's what we saw. Unfortunately, that's our problem when we have Kirk Cousins, and we know that's the problem, and we have to do a better job of making sure that is not the issue why the offense is not working well. The Dallas Cowboys had the means of making that happen, and they made it happen. I mean, I feel like sometimes we do have to credit the defenses a little bit. This is a great offense. I mean, it should be a great offense, and it's not because maybe it's a little too easy to let them down. Like we saw with some pressure. We saw with the Bengals, all it took was some pressure for them to make it terrible in the third and fourth quarter. So it's with Cousins, you have to have a structure there. The structure was not there last night, and that's why he was bad. And that's just kind of how his entire Minnesota career has gone. When the structure is there, you play well. Like when Tyler mentioned that New Orleans game for 2019, the structure was there. He played well. Offensive line played well. The defense created turnovers, and he delivered his part. When the full team can't play well, Kirk Cousins is not the quarterback that's going to pick up the slack. And unfortunately, the team is not playing very complete games this year. We've seen, 4 times this season already where the team just fails to play a complete game, and Cousins is not the guy that's going to cover your fuss. So moving forward, I mean, you need more from your other players, unfortunately. You usually lean on your quarterback to cover deficiencies elsewhere. Now you're going to have an even bigger deficiency because your number one pass rusher is 34 years old, and you're getting one pressure from your other guys. So Cousins is going to have to step up. I don't see it happening, unfortunately. I know how over the next few weeks we're going to be talking about the future of this team rather than what they're doing now, because they have a lot of hard teams. They have the Rams that just traded for Von Miller. They have the Steelers that are actually coming around to back to being a better football team. The Packers twice, the Chargers, the Ravens. And I mean, these teams have flaws. They all have flaws, but most of them have pretty solid quarterbacks to cover them. And we're kind of missing that. And that's what makes us like that middle of the pack to not so great team.
Problem is, we paid that quarterback to cover up those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
He's paid that much, and definitely will be next year.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of some of the conversation we had with Mac Jones coming out of Alabama. Mac Jones' ceiling is kind of like a Kirk Cousins guy. Like, he's not overwhelmingly athletic or impressive with his arm or his decision making. He is a capable starting quarterback at his ceiling in the National Football League, who's going to be phenomenal on his rookie contract. But when it comes time to giving him the second contract, he's not going to be worth it. And that's kind of where we're at with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is a top 8 to top 15 quarterback who is not worth what you're paying him, because as we just alluded to, when there are issues, he is not the guy to overcome those issues or compensate for the fact that we're having those issues. Like, Garrett Bradbury has been a massive, massive issue for this team for 3 years. I was talking in a group chat, and I see one of the guys in that chat, Ian Cummings, PFN's lead draft analyst, in the comments. Appreciate you joining, man. We're kind of talking about PFF grades, and I think it was Trey Hill for Cincinnati had a 5.7 grade, and everybody was just shocked. Like, wow, how do you get a grade that bad? I'm like, well, Garrett Bradbury has multiple 0 grades for pass blocking. Like, you just have to be that bad. And when you have something that bad with a quarterback who's not elusive, who's not a great athlete, who kind of crumbles under pressure instead of trying to actively avoid it, it's very difficult to win. And the amount of resources that we put into the cornerback position, we put into the offensive line, and we're still having these issues, it's a sign of failed development. It's a sign of poor, what's the word I'm looking for? Poor analysis, poor scouting from your scouting staff to identify these guys that'll work best for your team and in your scheme. And taking a guy like Bradbury instead of Eric McCoy or Elton Jenkins, like, was a massive misstep. I'm going to pound the table for it. We should have traded up 4 spots to go get Creed Humphrey. He is more athletic than Garrett Bradbury by a smidge. He's also 6'6", 325. He's going to get bullied up the middle. Like, we're not actively trying to make Cousins better. We're expecting Cousins to be great within what they want to do and not try to make Cousins great at what he's able to do. Bringing in the wide zone was awesome, but then after that, when he's just still has to be a drop back passer in those situations, what have we done to help him? We haven't really done a lot. Yeah, you could argue that our receiving core is not better than when he got here, because you had Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, who arguably was better 3 years ago. You can talk about KJ Osborne, but at the end of the day, what have we done to make him better? To help him? We really haven't done a lot. We've tried, but just failed signings and failed draft picks have led to this situation.
Yeah, the whole quantity over quality has seemed to have bitten the team in the backside. And whether it be a bad luck, injuries, whatever, linemen haven't turned out, and we've drafted a ton of those. Corners haven't turned out, and we drafted a ton of those high. And then when we draft a center high, he's small and gets forklifted on passing situations by bigger guys in the middle. There seems to be a talent evaluation misstep at a few key spots. And then mismanagement, once they're there, mismanagement and by the team, whether it be in the training room getting injuries. A hammy, Deshaun, you can answer this. I was always taught what causes hamstring pulls is that your quad or your hammy, one or the other, is stronger than the other. And they should be equal. And that reduces hamstring pulls. Now, when Zimmer first got here, we had the guy doing the weight program, and everybody started getting torn pecs, right? And Zimmer fired him after a year or two and said, no, we're not doing that. And we went back to either more free weights or whatever it was, and they changed the trainer, and the torn pecs went away. Now, Danielle Hunter's torn pec was, I think, part of that collision on that tackle. But these were injuries caused by training not being 100% of where it should be, or not focused 100%. And maybe a team can't control that with a player, especially in the offseason when the player does what the player does, right? And but isn't that a part of keeping your team healthy, is in the training room and doing that smartly?
It definitely is. But I think in Patrick Peterson's situation, I think he on that route kind of took a mean misstep. I think he was covering DJ Moore, and the pass was like downfield, and he was trying to, like, if I remember correctly, the pass like sailed out of bounds, and he was more so kind of just trying to stop him from getting to the sideline. He took a hard stomp, and like you said, the quad put a lot of pressure on that hammy, and it kind of messed with it a little bit. But it's not. From what I'm hearing, it's not a significant hamstring injury. It's kind of like a small strain, and they're kind of cautious with it, and he'll be back in like 3 weeks. It's not like a huge thing. And then Danielle Hunter's injury, his pec injury, could be because he had just recently reamped up his training from resting that whole long time from the neck thing, and kind of like this whole area of your body is like connected. So when he's rehabbing this kind of area, this area is kind of infected too, and it could be, and yeah, it's possible that could be why he tore his pec. Also, could be because he injured it and probably went back in and played again and could have made it.
He did,
but unfortunately, injuries are the part of the game. This team. Right. This team wasn't really in a position to deal with injuries. They were very top-heavy coming in, even though some of them provided some solid games coming like here and there. But this team wasn't really in a position to be able with injuries, and we're kind of seeing it. So I don't know. It was kind of like the ice cream, like the topping of like everything that's happened. It's like you're struggling when healthy, like when you were struggling, and now you're trying to compensate for losing Patrick Peterson, which they did a good job of. If Dak, they probably don't do as well of a job of. I mean, but with Cooper Rush playing, the corner aren't awful. They weren't great, but they weren't terrible. Could have been a lot worse. Definitely could have been a lot worse. But now you're going into Baltimore against one of the best runners in the NFL that could also be one of the best passers in the NFL with no pass rush. So rough spot to be in.
Was there anything more you wanted to talk about, Tyler?
I think when it comes to this game, I think we're just about done. But then now comes the issue of what do you do going forward? And I think the answer is obvious. You need a regime change. But at the end of the day, Kirk Cousins, we've kind of already come to the understanding he's probably gone after the season because of his cap hit. It's either that or an extension. And with how he's played this year, I don't think an extension is necessarily warranted. Zimmer's gone. Do you keep Rick Spielman? I think that's a really interesting question and debate, because how much of what Rick Spielman is doing has been predicated or dictated by Mike Zimmer. And can he talk to the Wilfs, be like, hey, I drafted these players for this specific coach, not because I thought they were better football players than these guys. You know, he's going to have a very interesting conversation in order to keep his job, because he has a long track record of success. The last couple of years have been spotty. 2020 looks like a really good draft class. But outside of that, there's been a lot more misses than hits over the past 4 or 5 years. So in your mind, gentlemen, Do you believe Rick Spielman keeps his job?
I hope they fire.
If you're able to pair Rick with like an offensive mind. So I feel like when you start to look at what he's bringing in, they've had a lot of draft picks, but the foundation for the next coach is there because of Rick Spielman. So if we think about it, the offensive line has had good games. They had a great game against the Panthers, who have a solid defensive line. And if I'm not mistaken, I didn't watch their game this week, but the defense this week for the Panthers played really well. I think I heard that somewhere, that they came out and they like crushed whoever it was to play. I think it might have been the Falcons, maybe. I can't remember who it was, but defense came out and played fantastic. So offensive line had a great day against them. You have Darisaw, you have Cleveland, who had a bad game, but he's usually pretty solid. You're just looking to replace probably just looking to replace Bradbury. Spielman did that. You have Osborne, you have JJ, you have Cook. Spielman did that too. You have Kellen Mond. We don't know what's there yet. We don't know if an offensive mind is able to do anything with him. If not, you have the next guy coming in. Spielman's going to facilitate some way of getting that guy. Now you go to the defensive side of the ball, where things have kind of fallen through, and you have more free agents, I think, maybe than homegrown starters, but you still have Kendricks, who will probably be here. I think Barr will be gone. You have Hunter, if he stays after this year. And then you have Armon Watts, who was doing pretty okay up until last night. I think he had a pretty rough go of it last night. And then, unfortunately, you had the two situations with your corners where both of your first-round corners, fortunate situations that kind of landed them not being on the team anymore. So Spielman has done a good job of having this roster ready for a quick turnaround. I mean, you might have to end up gutting the defense a little bit, but they have found success in replacing those players. Maybe not along the edge. They may have to change their philosophy up a little bit and start to draft higher with the edge. Oh man, what did he say? Who were we agreeing?
No, he agreed. He asked, "Isn't that true with just about any GM that they get the partial?" They get the 80%. Spielman's not got 100%. No way.
Yeah. But I mean,
he's been here since 2006, involved with personnel.
I mean, and you get that relationship. Yeah, I think he took over fully in like 2012 or 2011, I think.
You're right.
2011, I believe, was his first
I mean, it can definitely be better. Don't get me wrong. It can for sure be better.
Yeah, but we had
that rough go with the quarterbacks for like a long time, which
he's been involved for that long and has never gotten over the hump, right? Zimmer's in his 8th season and hasn't gotten over the hump. We want to shit can Zimmer in a heartbeat. But I'm saying GM's as much responsible as the head coach. They're in charge of personnel. They're in charge of scouting. They're in charge of making sure the right hires are made, whether it be the head coach, right, and then supervise all the subsequent coaches, and making sure everything goes. And it has failed on his watch. The most we've gotten is to 2 NFC championships. One we got lost to the Saints with Brett Favre, and the other one we got destroyed by the Eagles. Those are all under his watch. He does not have that record of success that, to me, would deem keeping him along with everybody else. You know, it doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to blow it all up, blow it up. Get some new minds in there. Get some new thought processes going in there, because the old ones haven't worked.
No, 100%. The old
I think
ones
what you can do instead, when you get rid of, so Spielman has drafted relatively well, and you kind of risk of going from drafting relatively well to being the Rams, who now trade all their draft picks for players. So when you run that kind of risk, I think you have to see what's out there first. We kind of got rid of like our protege in the making with Patton.
Yeah, but let's
It
talk
is.
about drafting
But
well.
if we
How
still
many of
had
those
Patton, we
drafts
still
have been
kind of had that
successful?
guy. I mean, if you look at it, we've gotten kind of like a star piece of our. I think we've gotten a star piece of like almost every draft except for maybe 17 or maybe 18. I can't remember which one it was where the whole draft was like a dud. But I think each corner pieces have all come from a different draft. I think like because Cook came from a separate draft, O'Neal came from a separate draft, Darisaw different draft, and you have Cleveland. I can't remember what draft.
Yeah, but how many linemen were
from. I think he
drafted
came in
before
with
that?
Jefferson, and then you have Osborne. And that's a valid point. They've taken a line to build that offensive line, but it's almost there. You have your two cornerstone tackles. The interior should be easier to fill now that you're not spending a ridiculous amount of money on both tackles. So you can make the argument that the progress is there for a new coach to come in and work with it, but you can also make the argument that he's been at it for 8 years, that it's time for something new. But you have to see what's there. You can't just fire him for firing's sake. I feel like not like with Zimmer. With Zimmer, like it's done. You need a different philosophy. You got to go. With Spielman, you can maybe bring in different voices when it comes to who to draft, but his drafting philosophy within itself has been pretty good, probably top 10 in the NFL. So
only by
unless
quantity,
you find somebody out there, you don't really have that George Patton anymore. I feel like if you had that George Patton, I mean, as long as you got it, I mean, I don't think it, I mean, does it really matter how you came across it as long as you have it?
Yeah, you're wasting capital.
I mean, there are not many teams looking to start over. If you have 15
selections in a draft and 3 of them make the team, that's horrible.
At the end of the day,
that's a good draft. That's a good when you draft, you're looking for 2 starters and a bunch of role players.
And when have we gotten 2 starters out of the same draft?
I mean,
15. That was it.
Well, we just did with right. I mean, we just did with Osborne and Cleveland. I think they all came from the same draft. And Dantzler. Well, Dantzler, we don't know now. He kind of fell off a cliff too. But only thing I'm saying is that there are not many teams looking for a coaching change that is in the position that the Vikings are, and the Vikings are in that position because of Spielman. They're eligible for a quick turn because of Spielman. You bring in, even with Kirk Cousins still here, you bring in a free agent center that can play better than Bradbury, and you get an offensive mind in there, and you're probably looking at a top 6-7 offense next offseason if everybody remains healthy. So Spielman, he has to be credited with having that foundation when the new coach comes in. And I'm saying that would probably be the only reason why he would stick around. I mean, there's arguments for both sides.
No, the only reason I think is Clifford. I think it was Clifford that said it. The Wilfs aren't going to want to spend both head coach and GM money next year on 2 guys that aren't doing anything while they have 2 more. That's the only reason I see that they would. And I love your youth and optimism, Deshaun. I've been around too long and seen this fail too many times. It gets tiresome, and I hope you're right.
Yeah. So I want to chime in real quick before we kind of move on, and I think there's a big thing to parse out when Quang is going after Deshaun. But I think what you said is fair. But I think the big thing is you have to incorporate process and results, because, and it's something you talk about all the time in analytics, good process will give you good results, even if it's not every time. And more specifically, if you want to kind of break it down, going for it on 4th down, something we've talked about a lot on this show. If you go for it on 4th down more often than not, you are going to benefit from it. And by continuing to use that process in smart situations, you are going to see benefits and you are going to get victories from it. The Browns have benefited greatly from it. The Bengals were the most aggressive 4th down team last year. They didn't see a lot of success, but they have won multiple games because of it this season, just by continuing to go for it on those 4th and short situations in opportune moments.
Heck,
If you
when
utilize good process,
Zimmer
go ahead,
went
Dave.
for it on one of the fourth downs yesterday, and they made it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you continue to utilize good process, you will get good results. And I think you have to parse out like, hey, if we utilize good process and you have some misses, now it's okay. You should be drafting corners pretty much every single year because they are incredibly valuable. And to be able to go 3 to 4 deep is fantastic in this league because you need to be able to have that flexibility. Especially one, guys get hurt. Two, you're going to face the Chiefs who go 4 wide regularly. You face those teams who love to spread you out, and you want to be able to rotate guys in and out to keep them fresh throughout a game. You don't want Patrick Peterson playing 100% of snaps. If you can be a successful defense, he plays 70 to 80%. That's perfect. Keep him fresh throughout the year because he is on the wrong side of 30. But utilizing good process is, to me, more important than getting good results because you're going to see more good results by utilizing good process. That's at least my take on it.
Stephen Fortune
and I agree. And we saw a pretty good process with getting Darisaw.
Yeah, I agree. I would have preferred that pick to be Fields, but considering we attacked a need with what I considered a really, really, really good value at 23, and we did not take a guard in round 1, that was fantastic process. But let's kind of move on because let's be honest, we're going to start talking draft here pretty soon. The way this season is trending, and
Drew asked that question: when are we going to start talking draft?
Well, we're not going to become a draft focus show until the season is, for lack of a better term, over. If this team ends up at 3-7, we'll probably start talking heavy draft because at that point, 3-7, the writing's essentially on the wall. We could make a comeback like we did last year, but once it gets to that point is when we'll really start talking draft. But let's talk quarterbacks because it was brought to our attention today by, I believe, Ben Gessling that at the Nevada game Friday night was none other than Rick Spielman to watch Nevada quarterback Carson Strong. Now, if you are not familiar with Strong, I recommend you give him a watch. He is a part of a lot of those like Pac-12 after dark kind of games, and they run a modified air raid hybrid, which is really fun. If you remember the offense that Colin Kaepernick played in college, where they ran a lot of pistol, read option kind of stuff, like they run a air raid passing scheme that also focuses on running the football. So it is a very unique style of offense that Jay Norvell has really taken from Chris Alton, perfected over the last few years. And Carson Strong, that he feels like a Ben Roethlisberger type. He is not super mobile, but he's got a rocket. He can make throws to every level of the field. He's got confidence, but he's not going to stretch the play out. He's not going to create off structure, but he's a master of maneuvering inside the pocket. So it'd be very interesting to see if the Vikings end up going that direction because you're kind of talking about a guy who is not too dissimilar to Kirk Cousins. I don't think he is Kirk Cousins. I don't think you can make that comparison. But at the end of the day, having a guy like that could be very valuable for this team in the way the NFL is trending with driving the ball down the field. Deshaun, have you had an opportunity to watch any Carson Strong, and do you have any initial thoughts?
I haven't watched anybody, man. I can't even. My Saturdays are busy. I work every ball. I just catch the craziness on Twitter. I've seen a few of the names out there. Everybody loves Malik Willis. Desmond Ryder, I've heard of. I'm trying to keep up here. The guy from Oklahoma, but apparently he sucks now. He got benched for somebody else. I got that one from Ryan, I think.
Spencer Rattler
what's his name? Spencer Rattler, right? Spencer Rattler, right?
Yep. Yeah, he went into the season as QB1 by a lot of people, but then he had some struggles and he kind of lost his confidence. So he struggled against Texas. They pulled him. He replaced him with true freshman 5-star Caleb Williams, who's a top 10 recruit in the country, and he has just kind of taken over. So Rattler's probably going to end up transferring after the season, but he still has all the tools you want in a quarterback, even through an fantastic 45-yard touchdown at the end of the Texas Tech game this past Saturday. So he's still got it, but Oklahoma just...
He's raw.
Yeah, he's got all the tools, but at the same time, it
needs refined,
almost
polished.
It's almost unfair for him because you had, before him, 2 consecutive number 1 overall picks, and then Jalen Hurts was taken in the middle of round 2. So that's some heavy pedigree that you have to follow up. And Oklahoma fans have some unrealistic expectations where they expect borderline perfection. And that can be really taxing on a player. They were chanting for Caleb Williams in the 3rd game this year for the Sooners. Like, they are a hardcore fan base. Like Philly, but less of an extreme. So he's going to be a guy to watch. Couple other guys that we really need to keep our eye on. I know Deshaun mentioned him, Malik Willis. He needs to figure out how to work within structure, master the pocket, because when he scrambles, he can make plays, and he's got a whip for an arm. There are some throws they'll make you puke. They're so good. Matt Corral out of Ole Miss runs that Lane Kiffin RPO style offense incredibly efficient and well, pinpoint accurate. He's got a really good arm, and he has really cut the mistakes down. Last year he had 12 interceptions. 11 of them came in 2 games against Texas A&M and against Arkansas, and he absolutely blew those 2 games for the Ole Miss Rebels. Drew, I'm actually talking about Matt Corral right now. I love him. I think he's got some stuff to work on, but at the same time, this QB class is bad, and you're not going to find a guy that's would have probably ended up in most people's top 5 quarterbacks last year, which is why a lot of people were really upset when the Vikings passed on Fields, because you can't ever count on a class being good. There are about 10 or 12 guys that could be good going into the year, but nobody's really differentiated themselves enough to be worthy of like a top 10 pick. And when you're taking a quarterback, that's kind of scary. Like, you don't want to force yourself into an EJ Manuel in 2013 or Geno Smith, or a Dwayne Haskins. You don't want to force yourself to take a guy because you need a guy. You want to take a guy because he's the guy. Vikings fans remember Christian Ponder. That was a forced pick. Like, we need to take a guy because he's the guy.
But all those guys will get inflated before we get to the draft anyways. So, just because of the rarity, their price goes up. Now, whether last year they wouldn't have been first-round picks, some of them this year will be, just because they're needed. And it's not because of their skill. But
you could still get 6 quarterbacks going in round 1 because it is needed. Like, there are a lot of quarterback needy teams, which is good for the Vikings if they choose to move on from Kirk Cousins. There will be suitors for Kirk Cousins, and you can get some real draft capital. Joseph, I see you mentioned Keaton Slovis, and then I'm going to go back to you, Dave, because I know you're about to say something. Keaton Slovis is Kirk Cousins. We don't want another Kirk Cousins. We want an improvement over Kirk Cousins, and we want somebody who's going to be a game changer. Drafting Keaton is not that kind of player.
Nicholas, yes, we did talk about that. Deshaun hit it early, and it was unfortunate. You may have been abusing your alcohol during the game. You weren't the only one, by the way. There was a whole bunch of us that did that, and I can sympathize. Well, I think we've hit enough for tonight. We've got a lot more to go as we talk Vikings every Monday, turning your Mondays purple, as we say. And then we'll start feeding in a little bit of draft stuff like we did tonight. Both Tyler and Deshaun are doing a great job of that. Deshaun will work on his internet so he doesn't lag. And any last words, you two?
My last words are a little too slow. My bad. They'll come in as soon as start talking, I'm sure.
All you, Deshaun.
Is Mon the answer, as Drew asked?
Listen, the internet is bad tonight, man. Listen, I will. We don't know that about mine yet, but my internet is also not allowing me to answer that question. So we are going to roll out of here before I get shut off completely.
All right,
I'm looking like Yinka with this internet, man. Sheesh.
Yeah.
Drew, I'll talk to you more outside of the show about Kellen Mond. I really don't think he's the answer. I didn't think he was the answer when we drafted him. I thought the process was great by taking a quarterback you can try and develop. He has all the tools, but the lack of progression we saw in his 4 years at Texas A&M in 47 games, 44 of them being starts, was just not enough for me to want to sink my teeth into a guy that high. I would have rather taken Houston's Davis Mills out of Stanford because he only had 11 starts. He was young. He had all the tools with his arm. He was the number one pocket passer in the 2018 recruiting class. Like, the guy's got it, but he needs a lot of time. And that was something we could have afforded him. But the process taking Mond is great. I'm not a fan of Mond as the player. With that, gentlemen, I know Deshaun's kind of tapping out with the final words because of the internet. Dave, do you have one last thing to say to the good people?
Hey, join us all week. We're all going to continue this wonderful conversation about your Minnesota Vikings at Climbing the Pocket. But one last thing, I'd like to congratulate one of our own. You saw him last night on his final show for Climbing the Pocket. Jordan Reed, one of our draft and talent experts, has been called up to the big leagues. He now is going to be working with McShay and Company on the draft department for ESPN. And from the bottom of my hearts, we wish him all the success in the world. He is a great young man, and I'm happy for him.
Absolutely. Jordan is one of the best people and hardest workers of anybody who creates content. He is going to be an incredible asset to ESPN, and we are glad to have been able to call him a friend over the years. So once again, congratulations to Jordan, and I'm so excited to be able to see what good he can do for ESPN. With that being said, make sure, as Dave alluded to, tune in the rest of the week. We did not talk a lot about the game against Baltimore this upcoming weekend. We will be getting to that as the week progresses within the huddle tomorrow night. Jason leading the boys as a great point guard he is. A Wednesday happy hour with Matt and Ryan. And then Thursday hot takes with Flip and Eric of the Daily Norseman. Make sure you check that out during halftime. What a great way to spend your halftime show for Thursday Night Football. And then Dave and Darren coming at you Saturday afternoon for two old bloggers. Check that out. It's usually between 3 and 4 o'clock. If
4
I
o'clock
remember
Central.
correctly, Dave?
4 o'clock Central. We
4
dive
o'clock
into the
Central,
numbers. It's a more analytic show. We look at the numbers. We usually go over about 3 topics that are concerning during the game, and we'll see how it goes. I have a feeling Darren has some pretty pessimistic outlooks coming this week, but hey, who knows? We may discover a way to beat the Ravens.
There we go. And we are going to need it if we want to make a playoff push. With that, from Deshaun and Dave, I'm Tyler. Thank you so much for joining us where we turn your Mondays purple. Don't forget, all week, all year, 24/7, 365, Skol, baby.
Skol, Vikings!
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you're listening on your favorite aggregator, make sure you rate us. And always feel free to join the conversation here at Climbing the Pocket.